I told you to listen to me. I don't know how you can convince someone, I've been trying to do it with my wife for 25 years, that they really need to listen to you. You're the one talking, trying to convince them that you need to listen to their advice.
Yeah.
And I think I need to convince somebody else to convince the other people in my life to listen to me. Because me trying to convince you to listen to me is kind of self-defeating. So I need to have somebody in my life that says, hey, Robert, did Tobey give you some advice?
Listen to Tobey.
You should listen to Tobey. So we were talking about you getting away with your family. Yeah. So I don't know we'll see what happens with the podcast the next couple weeks. But you're leaving tomorrow.
Yeah, we're leaving tomorrow.
And as with most people heading out of town, things are really smooth and easy, and you're just kind of gathering up a few things, and you're ready to go, right?
I haven't even opened the suitcase.
It's always like, the day of.
Throwing in. But yeah, we're looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it.
What do you look for? Let me ask you, with a big family. So people always say, wow, Tobey, you have a big family. I'm like, nah. No, we have 4 children, and we've always enjoyed getting away.
Yeah.
What do you guys look forward to? What is, like, when you look back at the time, like, as we went on an RV trip a few years back, and when I look back at it, the times that come to mind, like, of my strongest memories, my fond memories, there's certain things like eating around outside, being around with paper plates and just eating together around a fire, or out in the middle of the Nevada desert, or sitting, as many people as it can fit when we're driving down the road in the RV. What do you think about when you think about traveling with your family? What are those moments?
Yeah, we've not had the opportunity to do kind of exotic sort of things. And most of our time has been really just focused around, wherever we are, having more present time with one another that we don't normally get. I mean, we try to set aside like dinner meals and things like that, but the families goes in a lot of different directions right now.
When you're at home, I guess. Yeah, when you're home, it's hard to get people to be focused all together, facing each other at home.
So most of our trips have been like in one spot, kind of just unplugging, not
That's awesome.
being pulled apart, in different directions, but sort of kind of being together. And, we've done different, like really light kind of stuff, but the stuff that's been fun, going to like farmers markets or fields, you pick kind of stuff and different things like that have been really good and memorable. But again, just kind of really helping to pick back up, getting to know one another on a better level than what the day-to-day kind of affords you.
It's funny. I think it's funny. One time someone said something about quality time, and I listened to. I was listening one time to I don't know if it was a Christian therapist or something, but he was talking about quality time comes, and he said this: quality time comes in the midst of quantity time.
Yeah.
And I think when I look back at the times I've spent with family, and the times, the moments that really stick out to me are just kind of random. But they're usually not like the destination moments. They're the time when the RV trip for us was really significant, but like where we just kind of were in the moment and we were all together and we noticed something. It wasn't a planned thing.
Yeah.
It just, in the middle of a bunch of quantity time together, we had moments around the table, playing games, eating together, whatever. And I think sometimes we try too hard to fabricate or create the quality time, and what happens is you just need to get away. You just need to get away together and be like Brandy and I in Maui. That would just get away together, and I think that's really valuable for families. I'm really glad you're doing it. I'm glad you listened to my advice and you're getting away early.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. So we're looking forward to it, and it's nice to connect with your kids too. I mean, I've got 2 that are
2 just graduated, right?
Graduated.
They did graduate college.
They did graduate.
This week, and we had one graduate high school this weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, you were not able to be there, but man, I tell you what, I got up there and I said, there's a Meineke commercial from when I was a kid. I'm not going to pay a lot for this muffler. As the guy walks into the muffler shop, and I got up to the podium and I said, I'm not going to cry a lot in this speech, because you have to give a 3-minute speech with our. Well, that's kind of what we do. 3-minute. We do 10 minutes, but we do 3-minute speech, or 3-minute slideshow, 3-minute speech, and then Meredith was able to talk for a few minutes, and then Brandy presented her not her degree, her diploma. Yeah. But I was just a bumbling kind of. Oh, it was so hard, because I look over and this is my girl and my one girl. I only have one, and she's starting to cry, and I said, "Don't! Why are you crying? That's gonna." It wrecked me. So that was.
She was leaving the next day,
and we dropped her yesterday.
Months?
We dropped her yesterday. Yeah, for 3 months. So. But you did the two that you were expecting to graduate.
Graduated.
You had one cum sum laude. Cum sum laude.
Summa cum laude.
Summa cum laude.
And then my son says he graduated. Praise the laude.
See, that's the thing, is he was messing. Praise the laude. Summa cum laude. There you go. That's funny.
It's good. I mean, I'm very, very proud of both of them.
He wasn't magna cum laude. No, okay, all right.
They've both done a really, really good job with their academic career, and I'm thankful for that. You know, for what God has done. They genuinely see the hand of the Lord, and that's been a great blessing. You know, I think obviously parents do influence the direction of our kids. But we can't save them, and God has to do that work, and we can't force them to walk in the ways of the Lord, but to be this point in their life and to see both of them, what I see eagerly pursuing the Lord now, you know, in a growing, maturing way, is really, really exciting, and just extremely thankful to the Lord. You know, I could not be more thankful to the Lord, because I know it's what He's done. It's by His hand. And so that's the biggest thing that I look back over this. They've had some good experiences, some challenging experiences. They've had to work through a lot of problems on their own. You know,
both of them. Neither of them was the first year in, 4 years straight.
Right. Yeah.
It was back and forth, and doing a little bit online, a little bit in person, a little bit. Yeah. So I think it's, in all honesty, I got to tell you, in all candor, I think that is good.
Yeah.
Painful experiences. And experiences that are outside of like our normal I'm just going to go do this little thing and then I'll be done.
Yeah.
I think we don't value them the same way as when there's hiccups, there's new challenges, and you had to kind of, you had to redirect or change course. I think that's really valuable, especially when you can actually finish.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think it's nice to set your sights towards a goal, but sometimes the goal is not a straight line, you know.
Rarely.
And to see the obstacles and be willing to kind of readjust, but still keep your focus on the goal is very important. And that's really, that's life, isn't it?
The journey is the destination.
Yeah.
It's funny because we talked about this last time about the creativity thing, and the end. Remember, we were talking about if I wanted to just get to the end result, the product at the end, I would just shortcut it and go to the end.
Yeah.
But that's not. And so with life, with education, whatever, the journey is the destination. For us, you know, getting to, when we went on an RV trip, going across country, it wasn't about the getting to that destination.
Yeah.
It was the journey.
The whole journey.
The journey. Yeah.
So
that doesn't really dovetail into what we were talking about earlier. The
creativity. Well, you have to
creativity.
start somewhere. Going, you know, you're gonna.
It's Lord Acton. I looked up the reference. I said, "Do you know the reference to the quote and to who it's attributed?" That I didn't know. It was to whom. Sorry, I have to always. I'm one of these terrible people. I have to correct my own grammar, and it's kind of absurd because sometimes it's things that other people wouldn't notice, but I have to, and I correct yours all the time too. I'm sorry. I just do it under my breath while you're preaching. Oh, he actually meant to say. Sorry.
You have to go where I grew up, and
I don't do it all the time. I'm kidding.
And here, it's funny the things you grow up with, and the phrases that you use.
Was someone giving you a hard time about one recently? Was there one that someone was?
I don't remember. I just have people make fun of the way I talk a lot, and say, like, "Where are you from?" You know, I don't know why I get that, but
it's more exaggerated than your brother. When I talk to your brother, that Eastern Shore,
I don't even hear it.
It's a drawl. It's some kind of different
weird.
kind of drawl. It's not a Southern drawl, that's for sure.
But there's certain grammatical things that I didn't really realize until I went to college.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean, so
Yeah.
I didn't even know ways that everybody says things. You know, like if one of them is just the tense. You know, so I catch myself doing it, particularly when I go back home.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of saying he came over, I'll say he come over. You know,
Oh, wow. Yeah,
things
that'll
like
get
that.
you. People will say, wait, what'd you just say?
Right, and
Yeah,
it
it's
wasn't
strange.
until like Nicole and I started really.
Well, and she has her own dialect. See,
But
she's not exactly from New York or anything.
she was like, why are you talking like that?
Right, I thought you were more educated than that. What did I get? Lord Acton. I was thinking about a quote. You've heard the quote, power corrupts.
Yeah.
And absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the reason why I thought it's funny because we weren't really sure what we were going to talk about today, but I think it's worth discussing. I probably even more than you, but I'm surprised sometimes to hear your input when it comes to government in particular. And power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's funny when you think about man, I really love. If you did a list of things that you loved, government would be nowhere on there. Like my local government, my state government, my federal government, right? Government is always at the bottom. I mean, it's like if you could put government, and maybe they do, if you could do a Google review score of a government, it'd probably be in the ones, right? And I think I've actually seen that, like DMV, there's actually Google reviews for DMVs, and all of them are like 1.6 and 2.
Yeah.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Our dissatisfaction with government, and it tends to be a common theme with me, and the reason why it is because I always feel like even people with the best intentions, when they get into places of, I love the expression, public service, and I think there are a few that get in, that serve well, and get out, and they made their 100 and whatever thousand they make in Congress or whatever, and they come back out. They still have. There was a recent interview I was watching. He said, "I still have a mortgage on my house."
Yeah.
It's like, wait, you came out of D.C. and you still have a mortgage? Yeah, I still pay a mortgage on my house.
Yeah.
How are these other people worth 20, 30, 50 million dollars then when they leave D.C.? So anyway, all that back, all the skepticism around government, it's just because so many people, when they get any position of power, it just seems to be so, congruent with corruption, power and corruption. Have you noticed that? Is that
There's a whole Twitter feed called Twitter X feed.
X? Yeah.
That's called Nancy Pelosi Stock Tips.
There you go, Nancy Pelosi stock. Yeah, just
And
follow her stock tips and you'll be a millionaire.
She her family has been in government. She started so her father was governor of Maryland way back, and so that's where she grew up. And obviously, she's a representative in San Francisco.
She's
California.
a public servant.
Yeah, public servant. But her whole life has been in public
service. Yeah,
but
you could tell how well she served.
One of the wealthiest people out there. And how does that happen? How does it happen? And it happens because of corruption and buying influence and other things. And
oh, trust me, it's not one side of the aisle. That's for sure.
No,
if anyone
it's not.
says that,
No.
you know, you're showing your true colors.
Yeah,
it is.
No, it's not.
And maybe we'll even talk more about that. Like where do we see corruption?
Yeah.
Paired with power, where do we see it? Do we just see it on one side of the aisle?
No, not at all. But I think there's somewhere along the way where you begin to justify.
Yeah.
This is for a reason. And so again, unfortunately it's on the Democratic side of the aisle, but I know there's been confrontation of Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez about they're doing this kind of tour together or something like that.
Right.
And they're so big on climate change and other things,
right.
but yet
touring in a private jet.
Flying private jets. And people are like, well, how can you? And we justify it because we're doing it to influence all these other things.
The impact they're making is offsetting. And that's
right.
where the carbon offset thing is so funny. It's like if you're making a bigger impact, by the things you're saying versus the things you're doing,
Yeah.
then what you're doing doesn't matter anymore. It's not
Right.
hypocrisy.
Do what I say, don't do what I do.
Exactly, because what I'm saying is impacting people so much
Yeah.
that what I'm doing doesn't matter.
And that doesn't work. I mean, obviously, you look at Scripture. That's the Pharisees. That's how they operate, or many of the Pharisees. Again, you don't want to paint one of the extremely
Think about it
broad
with a
brush,
pastor.
but I'm sorry.
Think about it with a pastor and the
Oh, yeah.
Pharisees. You're pointing out, if a pastor doesn't practice what he preaches,
Absolutely.
does it matter what you preach? Well, I'm making a bigger impact.
Yeah.
I'm preaching to people and I'm changing their lives. I don't need to change mine.
And I think that's the crux of the matter is there comes a point where we think, because I'm so needed,
Yeah.
or
Valuable.
whatever, valued in this plight, I have opportunity to be to a different standard than what I would hold everyone else to. And I think
Right.
that with pastors and otherwise, I think that's exactly
Yeah.
where the fulcrum point is, that kind of tips the scale, is when you begin to think who I am, what I say, what I do needs to be held to a different standard than what I'm expecting of everyone else to be in the pew.
When does that switch start flipping internally? Like at what point do people say, oh, it doesn't have to be what I do, only what I say? At what point do we start to, and maybe that's not even the point at which we're corrupted, or maybe we should define corruption, what corruption means. But what are the indicators? How about this? What are some indicators in me? Like, not you telling me what.
I'll tell you.
Exactly.
I'll tell you.
That's right. Well, I think that's one thing that we absolutely have to do is say, hey, I'm really not happy. And this is what parents do with children, if they're good parents, is say, hey, I'm really not happy with this character development that I'm seeing in you. I really see something that is, I think, taking you in a wrong direction. And we need that from each other. But how do we get that? Like, how do we set those kinds of ding, like our phone, like, but internally, ding, you got a problem. You need to address that. Like you're getting corrupted, or whatever that means.
Well, we read this morning in Bible study, was it Psalm 115?
115
about the idols.
Yeah.
And so it says at the end of those verses 4-8, I think it's verse 8. And it says, it talks about the idols who don't see, don't hear, can't take, whatever.
And you're going to become,
it says at the end, you become like them.
Like them.
And kind of
those who worship them.
Yeah. And so what you focus on, whatever, that's what you become. And I think that's a really important statement, as we would think to avoid some of the trappings of leadership that can lead to corruption and other things. If we are focusing our heart towards the Lord consistently, like, is my heart tender towards the Lord, or have I become like, that doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
If my heart's tender towards the Lord, I mean, other people can see that. I think that's even where David was in his sin with Bathsheba.
Yeah.
When Nathan confronts him, he's tender. He's still tender toward the Lord, even though he made a mistake. He's like, when Nathan says, hey, you're the man, David takes it to heart, and he cries out to the Lord. And I think we get hardened over time. We can harden our heart.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we have to have someone else help us to pull the scab off. Because I don't know that we can, when your heart's hard, can you see it yourself? Can you deal with it yourself?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess the question we can ask ourselves, and that is where we do need people like Nathan to say, it's the hit you over the head kind of whack. You're not seeing where you are, but I do. I see where you are. And that's where I think long-term accountability, we could go so many directions here, but that's why I say to people, that's why it's important not to be jumping from group to group to group, church to church to church, friend group to friend group to friend group, because you have no long-term accountability. If I don't know where you've been, how can I tell if you're growing? Yeah. I mean, if someone says, wow, you've really gained some weight, that's because they haven't seen you in a long time. Yeah. And they haven't, let's say it the other way. Wow, did you lose some weight? We'll say that. They didn't see you for a long time, and so but they had some reference of where you started. They knew where you started. But if you're constantly jumping around, you don't have anyone around you that knows what you struggled with within the past or where you've been in the past. And so they can't say to you, oh, wow, you know what? I really, like a parent could to a child, I see something in your character that I'm really bothered by, that I see as a problem for you. That's where accountability comes in. But internally, I think one of the questions you say a lot of times is, where do my affections lie?
Yeah.
What am I thinking about? What am I scrolling? What are the things that are capturing my affections? And I think another word that's very close to that would be attention. Where am I putting my attention, and where then are my affections lying? So that corruption, those things that we point to DC and say, oh, look at all them. I guarantee they spend some time and attention on those things.
Oh yeah.
And so when we see ourselves diverting into spending more time and attention on things that we think, well, wait a second. I guess that's a question I can ask myself regularly. Where is my time being spent? Where's my attention being spent? And where are my affections lying?
Your point about long-term relationships, I think, is a really good one.
Yeah. I know.
And
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
But
I told you to listen to me.
And it loops back to some of our discussions on relationships, like online relationships and other things. Like those are not going to be as perceptive as an in-person relationship over a period of time.
Yes.
So for me personally, and at Riverstone, say, 5-ish years now, preaching in front of a congregation, the intuitive people in the congregation can easily point out probably what they perceive as my flaws. They've watched it for 5 years.
Right.
Did
you want to go over those right now?
Yeah, let's do it. But
right.
So, but
someone for the first time.
Well, and someone like you more so, because you're seeing, you see more of a perception of who I'm for 25-ish years, but also in the interactions like this that we have. So you're able to see when some of those imperfections, which we all have, get out of line.
Right. And then I say bad things like, stop being Eeyore, or things like that.
Yeah. And so what I could say is, you're wrong. I'm not listening to you.
That's right.
That's one of the bigger challenges, I think, is not the fact that someone's willing. I think a lot of people are willing to say, if I knew you would receive it well, and I think you would, but I would come to you and say, hey, I think you need to make an adjustment there. But if I feel like you're going to be like very offensive and defensive about it, I'm probably not going to come to you. So
but you know what a good friend does? A good friend does it either way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree.
But a good friend, if you're truly a good friend, will probably listen to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And say, I think I have a responsibility to cultivate an openness if I want to avoid power, the trappings of power and ultimate corruption.
Yeah.
I have a responsibility before that flip happens.
Yeah.
To develop an openness to criticism and other things that's not toxic.
Yeah. So there's a question that just arose in my head, and it is power inherently bad? Or should we be this very flat hierarchy, like in our culture, that where there's no positions of power that would exploit others, right? That could even lead to the potential of corruption and exploitation, right? Should we level the playing field? Because there's a lot of people that think that. I mean, I guess that's kind of a socialist bent, but that we shouldn't have except for the people who are governing what everybody else. No, you need to come down a little bit. You need to rise up a little bit. There's got to be someone that tells everyone how to level out, and that's one person at the top, or whatever, one oligarchy or whatever it is. But is power inherently bad? Do you think?
No, I don't.
Is biblically? Do you think it's?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see God raise people to power and people in leadership. No one, while Israel's demand for a king certainly was not seen favorably, but particularly in David, he handled power very well. Even Samuel, who was the judge, who helped them make that transition from prophetic judge to the king, he was held up in very high esteem and knew how
Right.
to handle power. And I think there are people who rise to the occasion who bear the weight of power well, because people need to be led. There needs to be a leader, and the Bible talks about governments for our good.
Yeah,
it's good because it does keep things in order. So no power is kind of leads to anarchy.
And that is, I was going to say that's definitely the argument against it. To think that everyone can be equal and remain equal, I think ignores human nature, first of all, and ignores design. That there are some people that are just given to lead. They are they're just natural leaders and should be. And if they don't exercise that, then, and I think, if a natural leader doesn't exercise that in a good way, he probably becomes a tyrant, at least at home.
Yeah.
Be a tyrant in his own house.
Yeah.
Right?
So you look at someone, for instance, like in El Salvador, Bukele, the president of El Salvador, and he has wielded a pretty significant amount of power to get El Salvador in line.
Almost a dictatorial kind of.
It is.
Yeah,
even to the point of extending presidential terms.
Right.
To allow. And I think
But our Western mind says that's bad. That's bad. And that's our Western mind. I would say we need to say, okay, listen, the Western mentality is fairly new in the world stage.
But it's not bad to El Salvadorians. Most of the El Salvadorians I've talked to have said this has been a really good thing for our country and for our people.
And that's why his approval ratings are so great. And these aren't like under a dictator kind of. If you better say it's great, you better say you love me, or I'm going to kill you.
But what I would say is, I think his story, or what I will say is, I think his story has yet to be fully written. Does he hold on to power perpetually?
Right.
Is at some point he willing to let go? And I think that's why I think you could look back at like George Washington, who could have continued to lead or whatever. And
do you think our stories of him are? It's
accurate.
Funny. I think the founding fathers did a wonderful thing in the establishment of this country. I think this country is the best model of human liberty ever, right? And so, and I say that and I give credit to them, but sometimes you wonder, like George Washington, we hear all these stories, and then we hear the cherry tree and all this stuff, but we hear that he, because now you put a quote into Google and it says, well, it was attributed to this person, but we're not really sure that that's really the person that said it. But you think George Washington, what they say about George Washington was that he said, no, I don't want to be a king and I'm not going to stay. And I think they're probably accurate. Yeah. I hope they are. It's a good story.
What I would say is I don't want to keep saying that. What I will say is the generally held story about George Washington.
Yeah. And I think these are probably quotes that we can, it's only a couple hundred years ago.
Is that he was willing to give up power, which I think is one of the reasons why he is so revered. Yeah. And historically.
He's probably just tired.
He didn't. I would have been.
I know, right? He was, general in the army and
But, he didn't hold on to power for himself when he probably could have easily done so. Right. But he set a precedent that was important, for us as a country that, we don't give to perpetual.
The precedent is a good thing. Yeah. And I think, so then what do we do? Let's say, oh man, this is, because county property taxes were how this conversation started. Because you said something about a vehicle that I had, and I said, the county loves that vehicle. Yeah. They love charging me every year on that vehicle. And at what point do we say the things that people do that are in power, and when we see corruption in leaders, at what point do we say, I'm no longer bound to be subject? Because we are, I think about, we're sovereign American citizens, right? We are, the individual is sovereign in the Constitution, and governing authorities are actually subject not only to the Constitution, but the will of the people, right? And so at what point do I say, and I'm sorry, I'm round about bringing this question to you, do I say, I don't think I should be subject to corrupt leadership, whether that's personal property taxes, and I think that's corruption, or moral. I think there's a lot of moral corruption, immoral laws and legislation that are passed that I think, okay, am I subject to that? Am I subject to immoral I don't know that that's property taxes. I'm just saying. What do we? Yeah, I agree with you. By the way, that's fine. But if you don't pay it, they come take your stuff.
Yeah.
They say you own it, and that's what bothers me about the whole thing is they say you own it. I don't really own it. If I owning it means I have sovereignty over it. I can do what I want to with it. Well, can I leave it sitting in my driveway? Sure, you can do that as long as you pay taxes on it. Can I, as long as you pay taxes? Well, I already paid tax. I paid sales tax on it. Right. I paid every gallon of gas I put through it. I paid tax on it. Everything I did, I paid taxes on it.
And I'm not opposed to paying taxes. I am opposed to paying taxes all the time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no kidding.
On the same things all the time. But again,
I don't know. I mean, at what point do we take corruption and say that's too far? That corruption's too far. I'm no longer going to subject myself to that corrupt power.
Well, I think there is there's different answers, I think, to that question. Right. Because if you're talking about government, I think there has to be a collective will.
Yeah, it's true.
For me to stand up against Albemarle County, what say so am I going to have? And they're going to be like, oh yeah, okay, bye.
Right.
They don't care.
Yeah.
But if you have 100 people saying the same thing, then there's more of an opportunity. And then if you have, 1,000 people saying the same thing. So I think.
All right, I'll start the petition tomorrow.
Yeah, let's do it. And government, there does have to be a collective will of the people, which I think is what happened.
Yeah.
In our kind of casting off Britain's, leadership of the Americans. I think when you're in a church or even a home environment or in a relationship with someone, maybe in a business relationship or something, that they have been corrupted by maybe money or power or other things, because all that can come in different ways. I mean, you can hold power over people, like a husband can try to hold power over a wife. You can try.
My wife holds power over me. It's not corrupt, but I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
So I do think there is a way to respond to that. No, again, people who are corrupt are hard to persuade.
Right.
So you have to go over their head.
Yeah,
And I think that's where we take our grievances to the Lord.
That's a good point.
So the best example that I would have of that is the Israelites in Egypt. They were probably even still pagan. They were probably pagan in Egypt. Not.
It'd been 400 years since Joseph.
But the Lord says, I have heard their cries, and I'll deliver them from Egypt. That their cries have come to me. I think when we are if we're on the oppressive side of power and corruption, we always have. If you're a believer, you always have someone to go to cry out to, who we're sure hears our cries, and until that time of deliverance, gives us the grace to persevere through it. So I think that's important. I think also for us, whether it's in business, where you can get corrupted, with the power or money or other things, whether it's in the church, which is also easily for church leaders to be corrupt, because, you're preaching.
Yeah.
You're preaching to people who earnestly, who biblically feel like you have you have insight into their eternal destiny.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why the Catholic Church had such a problem back in it was probably the 90s when it came to a head. Yep. I can't remember exactly the decade, but yeah, because people felt like they have to bless my birth and my, I have to be baptized and bless my union with my spouse, and they have to bless me at death. Otherwise, my eternity is completely forfeit.
And if they withhold communion, I'm I'm not a part of the church. I'm apostate.
Right.
Whatever,
And so when there's corruption seen, people are really hesitant to point it out because they think, well, I'm subject. I have to be here. They hold my destiny. Right. Yeah.
So I do think the responsibility on us is to recognize, we're ultimately not in charge. And
Right.
God does judge the wicked. He does judge the wicked. He judged those who move their life and live a life of corruption.
Do you think, and maybe it's both, and I think the answer is both, but does power, I don't think power creates corruption, because power in itself, I think, is kind of benign. It's atheistic. I don't know what, agnostic, whatever. It doesn't have any kind of loyalties, power in itself. But I was gonna say, does power create corruption, or does corruption desire power? And I think it's you probably see more of the, I would say, you probably see more of the latter, corruption in people, that pride and that corrupt nature in people desires power and pursues power. And the people that are not as, and I think this happens with elections, because you see all the time, we're like, wait, this is our choices?
Yeah.
This is it?
Yeah.
There's better people than this.
Yeah.
And the truth is, there's a lot better people than this a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's just that those people don't desire power.
Yeah.
They don't desire to have themselves put in the spotlight and have to, and so you think, okay, well then when there's a void, when there's a vacuum of better people, better candidates, then a lot of times I think probably corrupt people are pursuing power.
Yeah.
Do you think one's more prevalent than the other? Or, I mean, I know I've seen both, but
I definitely think corrupt people desire power because they have corrupt intentions.
right.
I think there's...
But then you see the people that go off to DC and you're like, wow, yeah, a really good family man, Christian guy.
Yeah.
And then you say, what did you do while you were there? Because I don't recognize you anymore.
Yeah. And you think, I would take it at face value that they had genuinely good intentions to start off with. But when there's so many things pulling at you, I think it's easy to get off if you don't have a clear focus.
It reminds me of the one, there was a man that I always wondered how he did it, but you remember Raji Devaraj?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Raji Devaraj was a minister in the red light district of Mumbai, India, and where they literally had women in cages, and their children would then sleep underneath their cage. And like, he was rescuing women out of the red light district of Mumbai. And you think, there's a man who's in the thick of absolute depravity and kind of this demonic cloud, right? And this is a man that's going straight into it. And from what I know of him, he was a man who kept his integrity and has kept his integrity. And I haven't followed him lately, but you think, okay, that's almost what I see as in the people that you send off to DC, like go into the thick of this kind of this cloud of corruption, if you will. Because we know the money's being thrown around everywhere.
Oh my goodness.
There's so much money. And so that's what, in Mumbai, it was sex being thrown around everywhere. But money being thrown around. You think, then you say, go do a good work there. Right? And how do you send someone there and say, do a good work there? I don't even know. Maybe I'm being rhetorical in that.
That's right. I think you have to have deep-seated convictions.
Yeah.
And those are generally developed early in life. Not saying that you can't develop them later, but you do have to have deep-seated convictions of things that you will and won't do. I think I've mentioned this before. I think it's Calvin who said
Calvin and Hobbes? Oh, John Calvin. Sorry. I was like, Calvin said a lot of really funny things. John Calvin,
the reformer.
Go ahead.
The human heart is an idol factory.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So when you think about corruption pursuing power, his perception of the human heart being an idol factory that's continually producing idols that we're trying to pursue. For the grace of the Lord, the sovereign grace of the Lord, to kind of lead us towards him and to have some convictions about who he is, both in terms of righteousness, but also in terms of judgment.
Yeah.
Because there's some things, because we know judgment is coming, we don't do them.
Yeah.
Judgment's a good preventative
Yeah.
for certain corruption.
Yeah. And I think someone like Raji, and you think of something, what keeps a person who goes to DC from being corrupted, I think is maybe even that internal kind of, what do I value? And then it makes you see things differently. Like, he didn't see young women the same as the man who's walking down through the red light district that's looking around. He didn't see that person as the same. That's not, he valued something different in what he saw, just like Jesus did. Jesus saw people and he saw them for something very different. He didn't see them the same way the Pharisees saw them. He didn't see them the same way the disciples saw them. The woman at the well, people say, when they preach it, they say, was it, you're on camera. What are you doing with your phone?
I'm looking up a Bible verse.
Okay. I thought you were answering your phone. I was like, man.
What are you doing?
But you think about, like, even the woman at the well, like people say, it probably was a little scandalous for him to be seen standing alone with a woman at the well and speaking to her one-on-one. But he didn't see people the same way that other people saw them. And so I think that's probably what it takes when we send someone into a place like DC, not to value money the same way other people value money, not to value position the same way other people value position, or applause, not to value applause and that really, I think that probably comes with just a real humility that is unnatural, an unnatural humility.
Yeah.
Right? Not to be stroked, my ego stroked, or have money thrown at me and be enamored by that.
I think I want to share, but a man who knows what he cannot do, there are certain places I cannot go, certain things I cannot look at. I remember hearing a Focus on the Family podcast, radio broadcast.
Radio
time.
Broadcast,
and it was a guy, and I don't remember his name or anything. What I remember was he was a guy who was huge into sports and athletics and all that sort of thing, and he had gotten older, and he found that was consuming so much of his time, and he felt like the Lord spoke to him and said, I want you away from it, like for the rest of your life, basically. And he said that he doesn't watch anything. He didn't watch anything on TV anymore. He didn't, none of that. And he just was, in essence, saying, that's a place I can't go anymore. And I think sometimes we have to evaluate what are the things that we cannot do that are too great a temptation for us.
Yeah.
When you were talking, and I apologize. I mean, I'm not trying to be on the phone, but I genuinely was looking up Bible verse. It reminded me of Samuel with Samuel and Eli and Eli's sons.
Yes.
And I didn't. So when the Lord speaks to Samuel about his judgment upon the house of Eli, he says, "For I told him that I'm about to judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knew, because his sons brought a curse on themselves, and he did not rebuke them." And it's somewhere either in chapter 2 or chapter 4. And I didn't want to take more time to look for it, but it basically says they treated the things of the Lord casually.
Yeah.
They weren't doing what they were supposed to do, and the sacrificial system, the things that they were supposed to do, they treated it casually, that there was no awe left. They weren't fearful. They didn't care. And particularly in the church, I think that's where corruption becomes rampant. When we lose the awe of who God is, we lose the awe of God's presence, and we treat as casual the things that have been dedicated to the Lord as holy. And I would say as evangelicals, we probably have a more difficult time with that than some of our more liturgical brethren, because you walk into a great cathedral
we've gotten used to worshiping in storefronts.
And you come into an evangelical, and I mean, I can understand,
Yeah.
but we also have to realize, the awe of God is not in things.
Maybe we should worship outside more.
And maybe so.
Yeah, if we worship under the.
I think when we,
sky.
as believers, when we lose the awe of God, we're in a very troublesome spot, and opportunity for the enemy to step in is
That's a really good
very
point, because
available.
I think that's, and we'll kind of wrap it up, but I think that that's kind of one of the ways that corruption is stifled is with accountability. And accountability is knowing that I'm being watched, knowing that that I am accountable. Sorry to use the same word, but that I have to give an account, right? Accountability, I have to give an account, right? And so I think if we walk through life with that mentality, that's a corruption kind of antidote, is knowing that I have to give an account. I have to give an account. It may not be someone standing next to me, because corruption is really much easier when I don't have to answer to anyone next to me. Everyone is an underling, right? Now I'm powerful. Everyone's an underling. I don't have to answer to any of you, right? And you see it in Scripture. You see it in Nebuchadnezzar. I remember that story. And Nebuchadnezzar's like, and Daniel even warns him, be careful, be careful, be careful. And Nebuchadnezzar says, look at all that I have done.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, bam, he's stricken with this, I don't even know, it was schizophrenia or something, some kind of mental disease that makes him think he's an animal for the next 7 years. But you think, everyone was an underling. Everyone around him was an underling. So he didn't have to give an account to anyone, he thought.
Yeah. That's a great story, because you look at his son after him, who saw it all,
He knew the story,
and chose not to. But God doesn't give him the chance that he gave to Nebuchadnezzar.
No.
So
Daniel says to him, "What were you?" I love Daniel's response to Belshazzar, because he says, "You knew all these things, and yet you gave no regard to the things of God." Yeah,
and we have a responsibility to look at others, and to learn the lessons of others, so that we don't ourselves fall in those same traps.
Yeah.
We can't. We've seen enough of corruption and leadership. We can't say, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that
Yeah.
that was something that I was given to, or that leaders. Yeah. So God help us, right? Literally, God help us not to take our roles with any bit of power that we have as a father, as an employer, as a pastor, as a mentor, as an elder to somebody else, young men looking at us. Yeah, God help us not to take that lightly. So, thank you.
Yeah, bless you.
I think that's actually.